Hi, everybody, and welcome to this quick time management workshop presented by Tutoring Services in the Writing Studio at Concordia University, Irvine, as part of our workshop series on academic and writing skills. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about how we can think about time management and give you a few strategies that you can use when making a time management plan or when you're sitting down to get some work done. So first, I'm going to give you a quick breakdown of the content of this workshop. So I'll begin by talking about why it's important to think about time management. Then I'll go over the two phases of time management, which are planning to get work done and focusing when you're getting work done. And I'll end with a few actionable strategies that you can use in your focus study sessions. So the first thing to remember when we're thinking about time management is that overall, it's about time. So time management is about managing all aspects of time and focus, not just sitting down to work or study. So when thinking about this, you need to create a comprehensive time management plan that takes all aspects of your life into account, whether that's school, work, or your personal life. So think about all of the different things that you spend time doing and how we can manage them. So it's about time and management. So this is the process of organizing and planning how we're going to divide our time between our different activities. And importantly, so that you can dedicate an appropriate level of effort to all of the tasks that you want to accomplish. This is a really key step to remember. We don't just want to think about how we're splitting up our time and how we're going to dedicate that time to our tasks, but we also want to think about how we can maximize the amount of effort that we can use when working on those tasks and spending an appropriate amount of effort on each task. So, for example, if we need to write a 10-page paper, we don't want to spend longer than we need to on that paper. We don't want to spend more effort than we need to on that paper, which means we don't just need to set aside time to do it, but we also need to figure out how to get it done within the time that we set. So, briefly, what's at stake here? So, good time management enables you to succeed by freeing you as a student and a worker to accomplish your tasks methodically and intentionally while also promoting a healthy work-life balance. Ideally, good time management helps you get things done in a way that you're comfortable with and helps you get things done without cramming, without doing things at the last minute right before the deadline hits. Whereas poor time management, on the other hand, creates stress and headaches for you by contributing to an inefficient use of time and leading to burnout. Oftentimes, even if we do want to kind of just jump into whatever task we're working on, it's going to be a lot more helpful in the long run to think about how we're going to do that thing rather than just starting. So, I mentioned these two stages of time management, planning and focusing. We're going to go over both of these, but to break it down, planning includes capture and prioritize, and then focusing includes avoiding procrastination and distractions, and how to make good use of your time. So we'll start with planning. So my first tip here is capture. And by capture, I mean write everything down. And I do mean everything down, please. So why is it important to write everything down? Well, writing down your tasks, reminders, and ideas eliminates the pressure for you to remember them on your own. Your brain is amazing at thinking, at brainstorming, at solving, at problem solving, getting things done when you're being able to focus on the task in front of you, but it's not so great at keeping a list of reminders that you need to accomplish throughout your day. So we don't want to keep all of these things kind of jumbled up in our head, juggling them. We want to keep them on a physical list or on a digital list that we can consistently review rather than trying to keep it in our head while we're trying to focus on the task in front of us. And by everything, I really do mean everything. So that's assignments, it's reminders that you need to get done later. It's just ideas that you have if you have an idea of how to accomplish a project or something that you want to tell your friend or something that you want to start doing in your personal time. Try and write everything down. And I do mean everything. And the second tip here is to make a schedule. So once you've written everything down, if we have things that are time bound, whether that's meetings, classes, or deadlines, we want to create a schedule that we put all of those things in, which is going to help us avoid procrastination by keeping us aware and accountable of our upcoming deadlines. Instead of thinking, for example, if we have go back to our 10-page paper example, instead of thinking, I know this paper is due sometime in the next 2 weeks, we want to be able to pinpoint a specific deadline so that we can spend an appropriate amount of time getting the paper done before we reach that deadline so we're not cramming at the last minute. And again, I just want to reemphasize, if you do make a schedule, you want to schedule in your personal time, so that it can be socializing, it can be meals, it can be free time on your own, it can be sleeping. All of these things are important because you're going to end up doing them. And so even if you don't schedule them in, they're going to end up cropping up anyway. So we want to schedule these things in, take account of them before we get too optimistic about how much time we're going to spend doing homework every day, so that we can actually spend the amount of time that we want to when we're working. And the next step here is to make sure that we reassess these goals and these schedules. So we always want to make sure that we're setting aside time to check in on our time management goals and reassess our progress. Your goals and schedule should adapt to your own needs. These things are flexible and fluid. If you find that you need more sleep, or you find that you need more time to study, or you find that you don't have enough time to see your friends, we can adapt this schedule to meet those goals. So that's step one, is to capture, is to write everything down and create a schedule that you can follow. And then step 2 is to prioritize. So when we're thinking about all of the things that we need to do, it's not as helpful to have a giant list of just everything that we need to do. We want to organize that list into our tasks by urgency and importance. So if something needs to get done really quickly, it's very urgent. But if it needs to get done in 3 minutes, it's not very urgent. And then we want to judge things by importance too. So a term paper that's going to determine 50% of your grade is probably really important. Whereas trying to remember something for your personal life that's just a little detail that you think would be fun might not be as important on the scale here. So write everything down and prioritize it by urgency and importance. And then when we're thinking about how we're going to spend our time in a day, we want to block out our time. So instead of saying I have 6 hours to get these 10 things done, we want to block out our time and say this thing is going to take 1 hour. So this is the hour I'm going to do it in. This one's going to take half an hour. So I'll do it then. This one's going to take 20 minutes. So I can do it then. And then I can put a break in here. So we want to write everything down, organize it by urgency and importance, and then block out our time so that we're actually able to accomplish the things that we're trying to do. So that's the planning stage of time management. And then we have our focus and attention stage of time management. So this is sitting down to actually get work done. So the first thing that we want to think about when we're thinking about getting things done, when we're thinking about focus and attention, is how do we avoid procrastination? Procrastination is a super common problem that happens to pretty much everybody. And it's because we procrastinate because we are averse to a task, right? We don't want to do this task. And usually that's for a good reason. Whether we find the task frustrating, boring, unclear, difficult, or personally unrewarding, or for a myriad of other reasons, procrastination is just a delaying tactic that your brain uses to avoid getting into a negative emotional state. It's really important to remember why this happens and not just something that you shouldn't be doing, right? It's not just that we shouldn't be procrastinating, and if you are procrastinating, you're doing something wrong. You're probably procrastinating for a very good reason, and so we want to figure out how we can get around that procrastination. And so it sounds very simple, but we can fight procrastination by reducing our aversion to the task. It's usually a little bit more complicated than just that very simplistic explanation, but the idea here is to start by identifying why you're procrastinating and then tackle the task in a way that avoids that trigger. So for example, going back to our 10-page paper example, if our paper is really, if the goal is really unclear, we don't understand the prompt, we don't understand what we need to get done, it's going to be really difficult to start on that because it's very unclear. And so what we can do there is to try and clear things up. We can try and define and categorize exactly what we need to get done. So finding the instructions for the paper, creating a very clear plan step by step that we're going to follow to accomplish the paper. All of these things can be really helpful if we're trying to get around the unclear procrastination trigger. If something's boring, if we know exactly what we need to do, we just don't want to because it's probably boring, we can do a couple of things. So we can try and make it a little bit more interesting, maybe add in some silly element that you think would be fun, or is that's personally interesting to you, or think about some reward that you can give yourself after you accomplish that task. So if you need to send a bunch of emails and that's very boring to you, but it's only going to take you 15 or 20 minutes, say after these 15 or 20 minutes, I'm going to go get a piece of candy or some sort of reward that I can get once I complete that task. And then if something is difficult, instead of thinking, I need to do this really difficult thing, try to identify one step that you can take that's going to be easy and attainable for you that you can start with to help build up a little bit of momentum and a little bit of motivation to continue working on that thing. So instead of saying, I need to do this 10-page paper that I know is going to be really difficult for me, think, I need to write 1 or 2 sentences just to get started here. It's going to be a lot easier. It's going to be a lot more attainable. And it's going to create some motivation. So hopefully we've avoided some procrastination, or at least we've reduced our procrastination. Now we need to avoid distraction. So the first step here is to remove distractors, and that can be a lot of things, but usually one of our biggest distractors is our phones and the internet in general. And so the idea is to get these things away from us as much as possible and to create friction in accessing them. So for example, if we know that we use social media or use YouTube a lot to procrastinate, we get distracted by these things a lot. Putting our phone in a different room can be helpful. Putting it in a bag can be helpful. Turning it off or putting it in do not disturb mode can be a great way of reducing that distraction. Another strategy that we can use here is to create friction in accessing those apps that we know are going to get us distracted. So if we know that we always go on YouTube and get distracted by going on YouTube, we can, again, put our phone in a different room, or there's apps that will block access to certain apps during specific time windows. So that can be a helpful strategy. Just create some friction. Similarly, if you're working on a computer and you're working on an internet browser and you have a ton of tabs open that are very interesting to you and are thinking about all different things, that can be another big source of distraction. So we want to keep our digital workspace clear as well as our physical workspace. And then a couple other big distractors are other people, And things like television, music, and radio or podcasts can also be distracting depending on how engaging they are for us. So other people can be a big distractor, roommates, friends, family members. So we will hopefully try and find a space that you can be alone and you can be focused, or a space where you're working with someone else who's also getting focused work done in a similar manner to what you're doing. And we want to, if we don't think about trying to get things done while watching a YouTube video or trying to watch TV, those things are not going to be very helpful because it's really hard to multitask. And that's the second tip here, is to avoid multitasking, because multitasking creates a situation where you're not focused on two tasks, right? You're not splitting your focus between two different tasks. You're actually switching your focus between those two different tasks really, really quickly, which is a great way of making sure that you can't actually get into a deep state of concentration and deep state of focus. So instead, try and identify that one task that you need to focus on and focus on that thing. Now, if you have music or something that doesn't distract you, that does help you focus, that can be a great tool. But something like a podcast probably isn't going to be as helpful because it's stimulating your brain in a way that's going to distract you from the task that you're focusing on. So avoid procrastination by removing the procrastination triggers, and then avoid distraction by removing those distractors. Taking these steps can be really helpful in actually focusing and getting the things done that we want to get done, rather than saying we're going to work for 30 minutes or saying we're going to work for an hour and then sitting there for half an hour on our phone, sitting there for half an hour talking to a friend and not actually getting those things done. So we've avoided our distractions. We've avoided our procrastination triggers. What's next? Well, let's actually make use of the time that we do have. So step one, get organized. So figure out everything that you want to do and how you're going to do it. Know exactly what you need to do to accomplish those tasks. So make sure you have at hand the requirements for the assignments that you're trying to get done, or the requirements for the work project that you're trying to get done. Third, break down your tasks. So choose a task, break it down, and identify the next action step. This is really important if you are working with something that's a bigger project, that's a little bit vague, a little unclear. Going back to our 10-page paper example, there's a lot of steps in getting a 10-page paper done. So break it down and identify the very next action step that you need to take to accomplish it. And the fourth thing I want to talk about here is called the motivation trap. Basically, this is the idea that we need to be motivated in order to start working. This isn't true. Motivation is something that we can generate by starting to work, actually. So we get lots of things done without having motivation to do them. Motivation has a lot more to do with momentum and inertia than something that we just naturally have. So when you actually start working on something, you can generate some emotion, some momentum, and some inertia. You can get rolling, you can get working on that task. As you get more invested and more interested in the topic that you're working on. So if you are feeling really unmotivated when you sit down to get work done, again, think about our procrastination triggers. This thing sounds difficult. This thing sounds frustrating. How can we get around that? Let's find an easy step one that we can take to get us into this task, get moving, get rolling, and get into a state where we're getting our work done. So let's talk about some specific strategies that we can use as we're thinking about time management and we actually sit down to do these things. So space practice is our first one. And basically, space practice is the idea that instead of doing really long work and study sessions right before the deadline, we want to split up that time into doing shorter, intense work and study sessions over several days. Why is this important? Well, working for 5 hours at a time, for example, is really difficult. It's really hard to stay focused for that amount of time. And you're probably going to get distracted. You're probably going to get hungry and need to go get a snack. You're probably going to talk to a friend. You're not actually going to spend those 5 hours working on your task. Whereas if you split it up into 5 one-hour sessions over the course of 2 weeks, it's a lot easier to sit down for an hour and say, I'm just going to focus on this work project for this hour. Secondly, when you are studying, let's use studying as an example. If we're studying for 5 hours, it's not as helpful as studying for 5 one-hour sessions because we're only studying one time as opposed to studying 5 times. Even though we're still theoretically using the same amount of time, studying recall is really important in studying and practicing recall, practicing sitting down and getting back into this and thinking of what we need to remember. And so studying for 5 times is a lot more effective than studying for 1 time. This is going to create more durable learning for you and it's going to help you sleep a little bit more. If you guys could remember 2 things from this presentation, it would be to A, write everything down, which we talked about earlier, and 2, to try and use space practice in your studying and to not cram. Our next strategy is called the Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro is Italian for tomato because the person who pioneered this technique and wrote a book about it used the tomato-shaped kitchen timer to actually do this for himself, which is pretty funny. But the idea here is if you have 2 hours to work, instead of saying I have 2 hours to get all of these tasks done, you say I have 25 minutes. I'm going to break it up in 25-minute chunks, and I'm going to pick one task to focus on during each of those sessions. Why is this a helpful strategy for you? Well, A, we kind of talked about it already. We're focusing on one thing is a lot more effective than focusing on a lot of different things at once. So we want to pick on one thing, and creating a 25-minute deadline for us is a great way of manufacturing motivation, because we know that we want to have this thing done sooner, right? We don't want to have these 4 things at the end of this 2-hour session. We want to have this one thing done at the end of 25 minutes. And it helps us stay focused, because we know at the end of 25 minutes we get a break to go check our phone, to go to the bathroom, to go talk to our friend, to get a snack, to do all of these things that can be distractions. It's easier to push those off and say, I'm going to wait on that, if you know you have a break in 25 minutes instead of, I know I have a break in 2 hours. So using this can be a really helpful strategy for focusing and getting things done. And a quick note here is, if you are going to try this, try to be intentional with your breaks. So don't just get on your phone. Try and maybe find a friend to talk to, maybe get a snack, maybe get up and walk, get a drink of water. We don't want to break our motivation and break our focus by accessing something that's going to distract us and that's going to keep us engaged. And then our third strategy here is called Eat the Frog. The idea here is that if you had a really unpleasant task, like if you had to eat a frog every day, it would be really unpleasant, but the best time to do it would be right when you woke up. So you want to start the day by completing your most difficult task, because that task is probably what's going to create the most procrastination for you. And by getting it done, A, you're going to avoid that procrastination. And secondly, you're going to create a sense of accomplishment in yourself early in the day, which is going to carry you through the rest of the day and create motivation, which is great. So we want to start with our most difficult task right away, get it out of the way so that we don't procrastinate and so that we feel like we've accomplished something early on in the day. So again, our 3 strategies here are spaced practice. So don't cram. Instead, use shorter, intense study sessions over several days as opposed to long study sessions in single days. The Pomodoro technique, which is to break up our time into 25-minute chunks and manufacture motivation by picking one task to get done. And Eat the Frog, which is to start the day or start your study session by completing your single most difficult task, the one thing that you really don't want to do, get it out of the way, and you're going to be a lot more motivated to get other things done after that. Thank you guys for watching this presentation. I hope it was helpful for you. If you're interested in learning more about academic skills or writing skills, we have lots of other workshops on our website and lots of other resources that you can access. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to help. Thank you so much.